Hi, welcome to Biz Jet TV. My name is Fabrizio Poli, and today we're going to be talking about a different subject than usual. We're going to be talking about space. I've done a number of videos on space here. We've now created the playlist for the videos about space, the episodes here. Today we're going to be meeting with Dr. Brooks Agnew. Very interesting guy. He's a quality engineer, aerospace expert. Just written a very interesting book called Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, about what's going to be happening with mining the moon and the asteroids, the business opportunities. And I know that those of you that watch this channel because you either own a private jet or you want to own a private jet, you're business people, entrepreneurs. Well, space is becoming a new frontier, not only for discovery and technology, but also for business. And there's going to be lots of business opportunities opening up over the next few years to do with space. And so Brooks is going to offer us a lot of insight into this. So let's go. Let's get into today's episode. Off we go. Okay, so Brooks, let's start off with, tell us a bit about your background and how you got into asteroid mining.
Oh my goodness. Well, asteroid mining interest goes all the way back to the 8th grade. This is just prior to landing the first man on the moon. I've always been fascinated with the space industry, space exploration. I did a co-op for JPL when I was in high school, and when in San Marino, I was not very far from Pasadena, like walking distance. Two of my friends went to work for Hughes Satellite, and the other one went to work for Lockheed, and they stayed in that industry their whole lives. In fact, one of my friends is just now selling his share in the Iridium satellite.
Oh.
So, you know, our little group has been in it our whole lives.
Yeah.
And basically what we've witnessed is only governments playing in this game. And because it's governments, it's usually military. And I didn't want to have anything to do with the military. I'm a pure scientist, engineer. So with the addition of the Space Force, by the way,
Yeah.
It made it possible for private industry to begin, I think, what is the greatest gold rush since 1849.
Yeah.
No company is going to invest $300 million to send a craft to, say, the asteroid belt or to the moon to mine minerals unless they can be protected. And there are several levels of protection. There's cybersecurity, there's physical security, and then there's the actual infrastructure of actually, you know, having things like GPS satellites in space so that you can navigate around the moon. Right now we have nothing. And, you know, a lot of countries have tried to land on the moon and have done so unsuccessfully because the moon has a very amorphous gravity field. So it's not like we know exactly what the rate of fall is on the moon at every location, because there's a lot of heavy asteroids and meteorites and things that are underneath the surface that change the gravitational field. Even orbiting around the moon is hard to do because those gravitational fields pull the craft off of its normal orbit.
Now, you also mentioned in your book, you mentioned that the astronauts that actually were on the moon, the 12 that walked on the moon, had difficulty navigating because
Yes.
It's not like they're landmarks. Oh, there's that funny looking tree over there. We have to go turn right and stuff like that. So, you know, even navigation on the moon isn't easy, which is why we need a satellite system around the moon to help the astronauts on the moon do what they need to do.
Currently, what we're doing is we're using the GPS satellites on Earth to create a kind of envelope to go around the moon. Well, the issue is the moon's, you know, 230,000 miles away, and so the resolution is very bad. And, you know, when you're traveling at 1,200 miles an hour relative to another body, plus or minus 10 meters makes a big difference.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned in your book, and I thought this was really interesting, when you talked about the explorer versus warfighting race. Now we've seen lots of wars happen throughout the years, and even now there's still a few wars going on. And even though American foreign policy has changed over the last few years, where instead of going out and bombing other countries, you've actually been going out and building, probably because now you have an entrepreneur in the White House and not a warmonger. But we won't get into politics here. But anyway, tell us a bit about the explorer versus fighting race, because I thought that was a very interesting, the way you explained that in your book.
Yeah, I kind of opened the book that way because you know, the military has been dominating the space race for 50 years.
Mhm.
They're always Air Force pilots. They're always, you know, Air Force uh, cost projects that preclude NASA, and NASA is actually an extension of the U.S. military. And the issue is that the human race really, I think, by and large, is an explorer race. We traverse oceans, we climb mountains, we try to accomplish all kinds of records and establish great things. A very small amount of our society is what I call a warrior race. And they live to fight. They like to fight. They like to kill. They like to inflict pain. And really, on this planet, we have two kinds of fighters. We have those that are those aggressors that are constantly trying to conquer, trying to use force to get their way. And we have the fighters that defend against that. The difference is when the war is over, the explorer race turns their swords into plowshares, whereas the other race just looks to get rearmed and start all over again. And that is what we have faced in our society. The only thing that has really kept peace is when the explorer race is indefeatable, when they have an overwhelming force that the warrior race cannot assault without total annihilation. It was, we called it mutually assured destruction when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know if that even applies anymore, because I think that a lot of these people, they don't even care about living. They just care about destroying everything.
Now, one interesting thing you talk about in your book is about this element called helium-3. Now, of course, two important things you mention is one is finding water on the moon and Mars and other planets and asteroids, and the other one is helium-3. Now, obviously, everybody knows about water and how important water is for man, but tell us a bit about helium-3, what it is and what it does and what it can do, and how
Sure,
it can help technologically with our life.
sure. Well, helium is a very, very plentiful element in the universe. It's plentiful here on Earth, makes up a good part of our atmosphere. But most of the helium, about 99% of the helium on Earth, is just plain old, you know, helium-4. It has 2 protons and 2 neutrons.
Mhm.
Around volcanoes, where we have a more primal chemical factory, we can obtain helium-3. And this is where we've actually learned about how to use it here on this planet. But it's not in usable quantities. It's expensive to obtain. But on the moon, it's a different story. The moon has been exposed to billions of years of solar radiation,
Mhm.
which has managed to sputter off one of these neutrons. And so it leaves what's called an isotope. An isotope is an element that is light one heavy particle in the nucleus. And in this case, helium-3 has 2 protons, 1 neutron. Now, when we fuse these two together, or we fuse helium-3 to, say, deuterium, which is 1 hydrogen proton, 1 neutron, which is also an isotope, when you fuse those together, instead of bumping off a neutron, which is radioactive and we can't do anything with it, you can't even electromagnetically manipulate them, and hence is the reason why we have so much nuclear waste on this planet. It sputters off a proton. The proton we can electromagnetically filter and gather and use and extract the charge from, and there's no radioactivity. What is given off is heat, and that heat can be used to make steam. Steam can be used to turn the turbines. And so helium-3, either helium-3 fusion or helium-3 fusion with another isotope, we can convert all of our nuclear power plants over to radioactive free power, which would lower the cost of electricity to less than water.
Yeah. So how do we actually extract that from the moon or an asteroid and bring it back to Earth? Or
Well,
use it on the
fortunately,
moon to build something to go to Mars, for example, or Alpha Centauri or whatnot?
fortunately, the moon has these enormous craters, which are primarily located at the South Pole. And the reason that they're in these craters is because the sun never hits that crater. It's shielded off by mountain range all the way around. And so it's somewhere around 4 degrees Kelvin, and it's solid. And it's been accumulating for billions of years. One crater, the Shackleton crater, has a pool of this larger than Mount Everest. It's enough to power the Earth for
Yeah.
thousands of
And that's
years.
where you suggest we land. That's where we should land and build a base in the
Well,
crater.
yes, land near it and use probes or robots to core drill that solid helium-3,
Yeah.
either transport it to Earth or use it for power on the moon itself.
Yeah.
And of course, you could, once you have the fusion fuel, now you have fusion rockets, and you can reduce the time it takes to get to Mars from 7 months to about 70 days, or maybe even less.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So tell us a bit the difference in opportunity now between mining the moon and mining the asteroids, because obviously the moon
Oh
seems
my.
like an easier place to land on than an asteroid. So tell us a bit about the difference in difficulties and how the missions would be different, and also the cost.
Well, the cislunar world, you're only a couple days away. So if you run into trouble, you can basically hold your breath for 2 days and we can send a rescue. Asteroid belt is out beyond Mars, between Mars and Jupiter. So it's a long ways away. And we have to make what's called the Hohmann Maneuver, which is going from the orbit of Moon to the orbit of Mars around the sun, takes a specific maneuver called the Hohmann Maneuver. It can only be done during a short window of time each year. So it's much more difficult to get there. We have sent probes there, and that's how we've identified a lot of the asteroids that are targets like solid platinum and solid nickel, and we've classified them, and there are billions and billions of these asteroids out there. So to mine the moon would be fairly easy. We could do that in a decade. We could have operations there, and we could be extracting energy from there, and everything would go logarithmically from there. To go to the asteroid belt, this is a much bigger venture, and we're probably talking about 25 to 35 years to be able to get to the asteroid belt, recover an asteroid, bring it back, or put it into uh, what I call a, a gravity well, which exists at L4 and L5, which is a equilateral triangle between the Earth and the moon. And then L4 and L5 sit out on the Earth's solar orbit.
Yeah.
So sitting out there, you could be very stable. You could have a clear view of space. You could protect Earth from meteors and asteroids, and you could be a way station as a space station out there.
So we really want to go to the moon first, mine the moon, extract the helium-3 to propel our rockets at a faster speed to get to the asteroid belt, and then do our stuff out there and bring it back.
And the return on investment for helium-3 would be enormous. I mean, look at Elon Musk. He's managed to break through the barrier of government versus private industry going to space. They're making between 12 and 14 million dollars profit per launch. That's a good business model. Very good.
Yeah.
With helium-3, you're probably talking between 20 and 40 million dollars profit per launch. That is self-sustaining in my book.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. A lot of people that watch Biz Jet TV are business people that have their own jets, and obviously I'm sure they'll find this interesting. I mean, this is a business which not only can make you money, but also is going to do very good things for humanity. I say humanity because humanity will probably expand out beyond Earth. So as well as doing good things for our planet, it's going to do good things for us to be able to go out and explore the rest of the universe, which I think we're coming into now as a result of technology and that. Now, so you talk about Elon Musk, and there's been a lot of changes in legislation you mentioned in your book to enable private companies to go out into space. So tell us a bit, how do you think this space race is going to play out? I mean, you also, I thought, very interesting thing you talked about in your book was the fact that the Chinese have a probe on the moon right now that's growing potatoes. I thought that was interesting. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, the Chinese have done some aggressive experiments on the moon. Of course, they have a little environment on the moon, and they grow crops on the moon, and they have grown, and they've managed to sustain them. Now, the cotton plants died pretty quickly, but they were exposed to the lunar winter. But on the poles, there is no winter and summer. You're exposed to sunlight all the time because the sun is at an oblique angle, yes, but it can be captured with mirrors or solar panels. It can be utilized year round. So building a base there is much better. We haven't really landed anything near the poles. We've more or less landed in the big open craters more equatorially on the moon. And, you know, the surface of the moon on a good day is hazardous. On a bad day, it's absolutely unlivable. So I recommend in the book that instead of building habitats on the surface of the moon, that we use the lava vents. Some of them have been mapped pretty well, infrared, and they go as deep as 15 kilometers into the planet, and that would be totally safe. It would be a pressurized environment with gravity, and you could do long-term service on the moon.
So is there gravity inside these so-called caves?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So we should dig into these caves and build
Well,
our.
the caves are already there, and we've done experiments with the lava vents on Earth. So we already know how to use them, how to seal them off, how to navigate them, how to utilize them. And on the moon, all you really need is about 100 meters of coverage of lunar soil, and you can take it up to about 6,000 feet altitude, which is, roughly 11 pounds per square inch. It's a significant amount of pressure, but you need enough soil on top of you to make that safe. Otherwise, you're just going to make another crater in the ground.
Yeah, of course. So how is this space race going to play out? Because obviously we've got governments like India and China sending stuff up there into space. But then we've got Elon Musk, we've got Jeff Bezos with Blue Origins, we've got Richard Branson, but then we also have Mr. Bigelow over in Nevada, who's got some interesting things that he's doing. Tell us a bit about these entrepreneurs and maybe any other entrepreneur that you know of, that you've been talking to, that are doing stuff in space or planning to do stuff in space.
I am talking to several, and as in any industry that's moving this fast,
Yeah.
there are three risks. One, of course, is the financial risk. You get in, you get overtaken by another company, or you don't get your patents in on time, or you waste too much money on the front end. So right now, there are a lot of acquisitions and mergers going on, and they're going on almost monthly.
Yeah.
Some of the companies that I'm talking with right now are survivors of that process.
Yeah.
Of course, you got big guys like Bigelow and Bezos and Musk. They've managed to keep their companies intact, but they're acquiring other companies. They're acquiring other technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Cubesats, these little satellites about the size of an inkjet printer, they're made mostly with open architecture. They use Zigbee boards and, Arduino boards and things that we use all the time in Linux. But the issue is no cybersecurity. And the lack of cybersecurity is being passed upward to the companies that are acquiring these companies. It is a huge exposure. Can you imagine the problem we would have with, say, 250 CubeSats that got hacked and were suddenly used as tiny little missiles launching all over the low Earth orbit, busting up satellites? There are people that think chaotically like that. This is why primarily governments have only been in this business. Now that private industry is getting into, because we see the profit, we're going to need protection from that.
So how can we make a CubeSat? How can we protect a CubeSat from being hacked?
Well, this is what we're working on right now, is a protocol, some kind of encryption protocol that allows these or prevents these from being hacked. I mean, it's almost impossible. It takes a common language so that the industry can protect itself from rogue players and terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not there yet. We are not there yet, but that's the role that government can play.
Yeah, because obviously launching a CubeSat into orbit is, because it's very small, the cost is a fraction of what it costs to send.
Yeah, you could pack them in pretty close. And then once they're distributed, now you have a network. Now you have a grid. And this is exactly what we want to do for the moon. Well, the moon, strategically, in my book, I discuss, is the high ground.
Yeah.
Whoever controls that high ground controls the Earth. And that's the battle that's going on right now. That's why the Space Force was so necessary.
Yeah, of course. Okay, now, another interesting thing you mentioned is that one asteroid could be worth in the region of $400 billion. I thought that was really interesting.
It's enough money that it renders our current economics obsolete. And that's why I don't think you'll ever bring an asteroid like that back to Earth, because if you do, it would be like the conquistadors robbing gold out of Yucatan. You'd think Spain would be the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world, but they're not. Yeah. They're absolutely one of the poorest, because all that gold ruined their economy. Yeah. The same thing would happen if we brought an asteroid back to Earth. If you brought an asteroid the size of Rhode Island, solid platinum, back to the Earth, it would ruin our economy. That asteroid has to be kept out there and has to be used out there as a raw material.
Yeah, so because you did mention that once this mining in space kicks in, it's going to change the economy and we won't be using
Absolutely.
money anymore. Can you sort of expand on that? Explain to what
Kind of
that is?
gets into another realm, but I had to cover it in the book because of the economics we're talking about here.
Yeah,
We're talking about using trillions like we use a balance checkbook when
yeah,
it comes to space exploration. So we get to a point to where we need a different system of exchanging value on either side of the equation. Right now, we use cash or money or lira or whatever as our system of exchange. And the issue, understandably, has become that the system of exchange has built its own value. And it was never meant to be that. The producer on this side and the consumer on this side, that's where the value is. The system of exchange was never meant to be value by itself,
yeah,
but it has become that.
yeah.
And what we need to do is move beyond that and go, from a debt-based economy into a supply-side economy, because there's more than enough for everyone on the planet.
No, like bartering, like they do on Star Trek when they go on a planet. They exchange some of the
Well,
technology for some of the more materials they have and that kind of thing.
it's really the golden economy is based on consumption. For instance, you go into a restaurant, you sit down and eat. You don't eat a month's worth of food at one time. You eat one meal and then you walk out of the restaurant. It's a matter of consumption over time. It becomes a supply side equation instead of a debt equation. And it's much more sensible.
Yeah, so we get a lot of changes because of that. Very, very interesting. Now, what would you recommend? Someone that's watching this, that's thinking, I'd like to get into this asteroid mining or going to the moon. And I mean, where do you think they should start?
That's a really good question. Right now, I'm talking with 6 companies as a quality engineer. I'm a quality engineer on a Fortune 500 level. So I go into companies and help them become more efficient and plug their leaks of money and things like that. But the one thing that I notice is there are thousands and thousands of unfilled jobs in these industries. They're looking for programmers, welders, fabricators, engineers on all levels, both programming and mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. There is no way we could supply them all. We couldn't supply them all if we took every available engineer from every other task that we have on the planet. But there's no real recruiting system going on in this business. The guys that I'm talking to right now, in fact, the phone call I had a couple of weeks ago, he asked me if I knew a local fabricator that could build a piece for him for one of his rockets. I said I did, and then he found one locally. But he said the issue is that every time I mention it's going to the moon, the price doubles. So this is a big issue with it. What we need are individuals, especially executive recruiters or engineering recruiters, that focus on this industry.
Yeah. Do you think the schooling system and the universities are preparing enough young people to go into
No.
space? No.
No. In fact, when I hire engineers, oftentimes I don't even look at their schooling. I put a test in front of them, either a PLC or some C++, and say, here, solve this and write this. And if they can do it, I don't even care if they have a college degree. I think that the universities are very quickly losing their grip on higher education.
Yeah.
Higher education is right here on your program and other programs like this and the internet. Every bit of information you need to be highly successful in this industry is right here. It's free. All you have to do is apply yourself, learn it, master it, and bring it to me, and we'll put you to work.
Yeah, because sometimes, the universities don't actually prepare you for the real world. I mean, I had an experience when I was learning to fly. This was back in 1986, a few years ago. I was only 17. I was a kid. My dad said, well, off you go to Texas to learn to fly. So off I went for a month and a half, get my private pilot's license. When I was doing my first lot of training, I was afraid of the airplane going into, once you stalled the plane, it would go into a spin. And I didn't know how to recover from the spin. So I was, doing my hours, but I wasn't going solo. So then I was chatting to another student and he said to me, oh, Fabrizio, you need to ask your instructor to take you up and spin the airplane and show you how to get out of a spin. And you'll find that your fear will disappear. So I said to my instructor what I was afraid of. So he said, okay, we'll do a lesson on spinning. So he explained a few things on the ground. We went up in the air. It was dead simple to get into a spin and out of a spin. And I thought, oh, that's it. And the next day I went solo. And then I thought to myself, this should actually be built in the syllabus to become a private pilot. But there are so many people these days, and if we look at a lot of accidents that happen where airplanes go into what's called an unusual attitude and crash, a lot of the times that happens because the pilot doesn't even realize that they're in an unusual attitude.
That's right.
Number one. And then number two, if they do realize, they don't know how to recover, because probably during their training, they never did any form of aerobatics. And so when I had that experience afterwards, when I was training for my commercial pilot's license, I said, I'm going to go and do a 10-hour aerobatic course. So I found an instructor, ex-Air Force guy, and off we went, and we did all sorts of stuff, even flying down the runway upside down, just for fun. But, you know, and so that to me was, you see, there you go. There's the official curriculum that's not preparing the pilots for the real world. And the same as you're saying now for universities, are not preparing these young people for what's going to be the new space race and the new frontier, which is
everything that you learn in that classroom today is 5 years obsolete. Yeah. It's moving that fast.
So what would you suggest to a young person that's watching this that wants to get into the space business, or just go out and work in space as an engineer or an astronaut or whatever it may be? What would you suggest they do, they learn? Where should they go? What should they do?
Well, the first thing they should do is heavy math and heavy science. You need to master thinking in a calculus way. I'm not talking about simple mathematics. I'm talking about thinking in a mathematical way, which calculus will help you do. It's a much more elegant system of mathematics. And I would also learn to communicate and try to do it in more than one language. Not just English or Japanese or Spanish, but also in programming. Learn to program a PLC, learn to write in C++, learn Linux, just practice with the code. And everybody has their own writing style, but you should be able to read anyone's program and understand what that machine does. Mm-hmm. I have been sent in my early days as an engineer into a plant where the old relay style control box caught fire and burnt. Mm-hmm. But the machine was still sitting there, and they had the blueprints, just the blueprints. Yeah. And I wrote a program from scratch from just the blueprints of how that machine worked. That's a challenge. You do that, and that's how you qualify to get into this business.
Yeah, and you can learn these things via online courses. You don't necessarily have to go to a university to do this.
Either online courses or go to work for a fabricator or do some co-ops and get exposed to things that are way outside your league and stretch. And that's how you do it. And all these agencies, JPL, NASA, even most of these companies hire co-ops all the time. People right out of high school, not even graduated from high school yet, because that's where the real genius is.
Yeah. So out of these space entrepreneurs that, you know, everybody knows, you know, the Richard Bransons, Elon Musk, that, are there any new upcoming ones that you know about that you'd like to mention and tell us what they're up to?
I do, but I can't mention them. I actually asked a couple of them if I could mention them in these, and they don't want the notoriety yet.
Yeah.
It's highly competitive right now. There are a lot of acquisitions, a lot of, I don't know if you know financial terms, but there's a lot of shorting going on. Companies, in order to raise enough money to open a shop, get the machines in, hire the staff, they have to do a public offering. Yeah. So they raise the money in the public market, and then they're using that money to build value and get to where they're in production. In the meantime, their stock is exposed on the market. So their competitors will go in and short that stock, which drives the value of the stock down, hurts the company's ability to borrow money, and you drive them out of business. So the idea is to stay as stealth as you can.
Yeah, because there's a bit of a war going on then.
Right.
And where are these technologies mainly coming from? Are they coming from the US or, you know, Russia, China, or are there also some other places around the world where there are some of these smart guys working in their garage?
India, yes. Russia, definitely. Kazakhstan. And of course the United States, and some Canada too. And I've even met some Mexican ones that are right on the spot. But in China, not so much. You can't do anything in China. You can't even send an email in China without the government looking over your shoulder. And it's very, very difficult for an entrepreneur to do anything in China.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, interesting. So how do you think flying is going to change on our planet as a result of all this new technology that's going to come out there?
Well, all this new technology is pretty broad, Fabrizio. I can tell you that work is being done on even manipulating gravity fields around small bodies.
Yeah.
And if we get very far with that, we're going to be able to push craft to, Mach 20 in our atmosphere without a sonic boom. I know it's a little bit beyond where people can think, but to have a craft that can make a left-hand turn at 10,000 miles an hour without smashing everybody inside that craft is doable, but we don't know how to do it yet. We've observed it,
Yeah.
but we don't know how to do it yet. We know it can be done.
Yeah, we did an interview here on Biz Jet TV last year about the TR3B, and I didn't realize it was going to be that popular. I mean, it's had almost over 25,000 views. But the interesting thing is the number of people that commented on this video, and those of you who are watching, you can click on the link above to go and watch it. There's about 35, 40 people that have actually seen this thing and mentioned it in the comments below the video. And they're people from all over the world, literally all over the world, from Saudi Arabia to the UK, to the US, Canada, Brazil, Australia, and you're like, wow, this thing is really out there. I mean, what it is, we don't know, but it does follow what you've been saying. It's this anti-gravity sort of kind of thing. So whether it's
I don't know if
or
it's anti-gravity, but it is a way of lensing gravity. We know it can be done, but the material that you need, that we think we need to make that happen, is called exotic material. And it only exists in the core of neutron stars.
Yeah.
We don't have any of that. And by the way, a cup of that would be so heavy that it would plunge itself to the center of our planet and you'd never recover it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it's used, but I do know that you need that kind of gravitational field in order to make this work, at least make the patents that have been released work.
Elon Musk has been saying something very interesting about using his rockets to travel from anywhere to anywhere in less than an hour on the planet. So putting 1,000 people on a rocket, flying them from New York to Shanghai in 35 minutes. Obviously, not everyone's going to be able to be a passenger on those rockets because of heart problems and whatnot. So you probably have to have a special medical certificate to be able to fly.
But I mean, but
I mean, I can see that happening probably inside the next 10 years. I mean, it won't be every city because not every city is going to have a launch pad, but I can see at least 25 to 30 cities around the world having this type of spaceport, or whatever we want to call it, to launch the rocket and land the rocket. And that's going to change air travel. I mean, there's a number of people looking at supersonic and hypersonic airplanes, but
right now we go up to about 9 miles, and we've done remarkable things in the last 50 years for sure. But can you imagine going to 90 miles up?
Yeah.
And then doing it? You would greatly reduce the travel time from 11 to 13 hours down to maybe an hour and a half.
Yeah. Now, this whole moon mining thing, how long do you think it's going to take for us to actually see this happen? There's lots of theories out there talking about man back on the moon, or woman on the moon, as Trump calls it, by 2024.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to put a human on the moon to make this proof of concept. We could land on Shackelford, we could core drill it, we could launch a tube back out into orbit, grab it in orbit, and send it back to the Earth. We could do it by next weekend if we wanted to. We have the technology to do it.
Yeah. And that's probably the way to start. Send the robot.
Sure.
Let the robot do the work and then send the man.
Yeah, you just need to core drill it, get a small tube of that stuff in frozen form, put it into a tube, launch the tube out into orbit, grab it in orbit, and fly back here. You could be back in a week and a half.
So how much helium-3 could we bring back and forth with that system?
Well, not very much. It would take a lot of tubes, and you have a tube cassette craft that could maybe collect a couple hundred of these tubes. You got to understand, yes, it's solid at 9 degrees Kelvin, but we get it back into our atmosphere, it's going to want to boil in our pressure and atmosphere, or our temperature. So it has to be really thick, contained. Plus, helium-3 is a very small molecule. It will leak through anything except solid metal. So it's going to be difficult to get it back to Earth and utilize it. But
is that why we can probably only use the helium-3 in space? fabricate
I
it.
think it's most efficient to use it in space,
Yeah.
especially fusion. If you're going to do a fusion rocket, you're talking, with basic uh, compression technology, we could easily cut the, transit time from Earth to Mars to 70 days or maybe less.
So this would explain why we really do need a human settlement on the moon to be able to farm this helium-3,
I think so.
build stuff with it, and then launch it instead of trying to bring it back to Earth and do the work here.
Having a colony inside the moon, inside one of the uh, uh, volcanic vent areas, which are enormous, several times the size of New York City, that would be the future. You'd be protected from any solar misbehaving. You could create an environment that, of course, you'd have about 1/6 the gravity you have here on Earth, but it would have atmosphere, and you could work there, and you could probably work there a couple of years without too much damage to your physiology.
Yeah, and you say it's going to be companies that are going to do this. It's not going to be countries.
It has to be companies. If it becomes governments, then what you're going to have is eventually the wrong kind of politics is going to get in charge of it. And once that politics has the high ground, it becomes very dangerous. Our society has already proven that. When the good guys are in charge of it, everybody prospers. When the bad guys are in charge of it, everybody's oppressed. We just cannot allow that. It has to be free and open enterprise.
Yeah, in fact, you give a very good definition of the difference between capitalism and socialism in your book. Could you expand on that for those?
Sure. Capitalism is based on service to others. You see a need in someone else, you have the ability to fill that need, you're going to make a profit. That's what it's based on. If the customer stops buying your product, you're going to go out of business. Socialism is based on service to government. And the only people that really like socialism are the socialists, the few people at the top. Everyone else is oppressed. And if people think that, good health care is standing in line for 3 to 5 days with a raging fever, you're going to love socialism. If you think, sleeping in a barracks with a footlocker and a communal shower is adequate housing, you're going to love socialism. Capitalism's not like that at all.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and we need capitalism to do this whole space thing.
Has to be.
Yeah, that's okay. Another question. Science fiction is always something that has inspired a lot of people like yourself and like myself. How has science fiction influenced you, and what different science fiction books and shows are the ones that have inspired you to do what you do?
Wow. Well,
and I asked that because I'm a big science fiction fan, so I thought.
Science fiction is often the future view. I have on my book, The Present from the Future.
Uh-huh.
When you're writing science fiction, occasionally you go to the past, like with time machines and things like that. But usually we go to the future. We want to know how things are going to be. And I know enough about...
You've written some science fiction, haven't you? Some science fiction books.
Not so much science fiction. I've written books on the origin and creation of the Earth. So most of my books are nonfiction. Okay. I have a couple of novels, but they use nonfiction themes. Okay. The point is that if we put a vision out in the future that's clear enough, it tends to create its own resonant energy. And eventually, since that energy goes out through all time and eternity, eventually things in the present will begin resonating with that energy in the future. Yeah. And if we put energy into those things in the present, that future has no choice but to occur. It's a physical anomaly, a physical truism in the universe. Yeah.
So which science fiction writers have inspired you, or novels and that?
Well, of course, I liked Ray Bradbury, and I liked Isaac Asimov, and I even liked, some of the weirder ones like Frank Herbert, even though it was a lot of dystopian kind of futures, because of the technology that was drawn upon and the image, the vision that it created in my mind. It allowed me to, sort of shape the things that I was interested in becoming educated in 20 years in college. To create, the person that I am. You can say that I'm a product of science fiction as much as any race car driver or racing mechanic is a product of the Car and Driver magazines that they read as a teenager.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Brooks. It's been very interesting talking to you. What would you like to say in closing to those that have been watching this? Is there anything in particular, any message?
Well, there are going to be several live events this late summer and on into the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend getting out to these, especially in the next year or two, because some great technology, great presentations are going to be made, and you're not going to see them anywhere else except at these live events.
Okay.
So go support them. Contact in the Desert in June, and there's some other ones in September and October. Get out of the house, get away from the internet for a while, go out in the real world, come out and meet us, and we'd like to meet you too.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Brooks. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being on Biz Jet TV.
My pleasure. Thank you.
What an incredible journey that was with Brooks Agnew. Great insight into what's happening and what's about to happen in space, the opportunities, the Space Force, the mining, the future of space exploration, the fact that we're an explorer race. I also encourage you to check out Brooks' other books, very interesting stuff he's written, and also, as he said, come go and see him at one of the conferences he'll be speaking at, and I did show you the link on that one before. But if you enjoyed this video, there's more videos on aerospace here on Biz Jet TV, and we like talking about the future. Those of you who are watching, obviously business people flying around on private jets or thinking of buying a private jet, there's lots of opportunities there in space beyond our atmosphere as well, with the mining and that. So I encourage you to have a look at the video on the TR3B. Also, you can look at the playlist on aerospace here, and also this video on the Biz Rocket, all about Elon Musk's project about flying people anywhere from anywhere to anywhere on this planet in less than an hour. So comment below, what did you think about this video about mining in space? Would like to hear from you. What did you think? What are your plans? Are you thinking of investing in this kind of thing or not? Do you think it's a good idea or not? I'd love to hear from you. Get the conversation going below here. Also, check out our merch store. We're launching new products to do with the merch store on Biz Jet TV. You know, there's t-shirts, mugs, all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, give us a like. And that's all from me. And remember to subscribe also to this channel if you haven't done so already. That's all from me, Fabrizio Poli on Biz Jet TV, and I'll see you on the next one.